I remember some of the preachers and evangelists from my early childhood. I just caught the end of some of the old fire and brimstone preachers, and I'm sure some of you remember some of that hard preaching. There was an evangelist that actually came to our high school that predicted the end of the earth as we know it, and he painted this vivid picture of what it was going to be like in the final times. We were told that we had to be good because the day was coming when we were going to all have to stand before God and give an account of our lives. And then he said, this is what you can expect. He said it's going to be like there's a giant video screen above the throne of God for everybody to see. And they're going to play out your life. Everything you ever did. And if that's not bad enough, they're also going to put up there everything you ever thought about doing. Now, I was in high school and I wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing that my parents taught me right. And I know I did some pretty bad things, but it never got me in jail or anything that bad. But when I started thinking about the things I thought about, that's going to be on the screen too. I'm in serious trouble. I don't know about you, but I went to the altar that evening and I prayed to the Lord. It didn't stick because the time came and went when he thought the end was going to be. And we all know that those guys that predict the end aren't preaching truth, because the truth tells us only the Father knows. But the long and the short of it is, I was mortified at that thought. What if everybody knows really everything I think about? Everything I've ever done? If people knew everything there is to know about us, I think that if we're really honest with ourselves, we'd be a little ashamed at the very least, wouldn't we? I mean, we'd be embarrassed. I know I would be, and I think that if you're honest, you would be as well. The truth is, there's millions of people living around us right now that are in virtual hiding because they don't want to get too close, because they don't want someone else to know the real them, because they're fearful that if somebody really knows what I'm really like, they're going to disregard me and shun me and reject me. The Gospel of John gives to us what I call a snapshot of the life of Jesus that provides for us a clear picture of something that's very different than what those evangelists that taught me when I was a child. It's a picture of who God is and how God treats those whose lives have actually been wrecked by the sinful choices that they've made. You see, this story of Jesus meeting the woman at the well is about how God comes to people who don't think that they are deserving, who don't think that they have a right to belong with God any longer. So Jesus and his friends were traveling north, it says in the text, from the area around Jerusalem to Galilee. And it says that in the text, I think John pointed it out, if you read in the text, and we read it earlier, it said that Jesus had to go through Samaria. Well, that's not really true, because most of the time when the Jews were traveling from Jerusalem to go on up to Galilee, they would go all the way around Samaria because the Jews didn't want to have anything to do with the Samaritans. They were half-breed rejects from the Jewish nation many years ago, and they were like enemies. They didn't like each other, so they avoided each other at all cost. So Jesus didn't have to go through Samaria. He chose to go through Samaria. Jesus went through Samaria because he wanted to confront the prejudice. He wanted to confront and break down the walls of division among his people that had stood for so very many years. You see, Jesus came to heal the wounds of the brokenhearted and break down the divisions within the body. So it's the middle of the day. Jesus is tired and thirsty after a long walk, and the trip brings him to the town of Sychar, where Jacob's well was located. And Jesus sent his companions off to go buy groceries so that they could have a meal, and he was sitting there by this well with his eyes and his heart wide open. You see, Jesus is watching for souls who think they are outside the interest of God. And what better place than Samaria? Because literally every Samaritan felt rejected, not only by the Jews, but by God himself, because they were left behind to die. And then they had relationships with foreigners and aliens of that land. So they were treated as half-breeds. So Jesus is looking for one. And that's when the woman arrives. Notice that she didn't come in the morning early when the other women would come to draw water for the day. She didn't come later in the evening when they would come to draw water for baths and cleaning. She came in the middle of the day, in the heat of the day, when nobody else would be there at the well. And it speaks clearly to her position, even among the Samaritans, as being an outcast in their culture. Jesus then violates all social custom. He asks her for a drink of water. And she's taken back by all of this. As a matter of fact, everyone who would hear about this would be taken back by it, because this isn't normal. A man doesn't sit at the well and ask for the woman to give him a drink, especially if the man's Jew and the woman's a Samaritan. That is scandalous. But Jesus does it anyway. And then he starts to talk to her about living water. Now, I don't know about you, but that's not much of a conversation starter. I tried to come up with a good one for the kids, and bug juice was the best I could do. But Jesus is talking with her about living water because he sees something in her that nobody else sees. He sees that this woman is hurting, that she's hiding, that she is afraid. And she dodges every question and tries to change the subject when Jesus talks with her. So what does Jesus do? Well, the first thing he does is lets her know that he knows everything. He lets her know that he knows. He says, go, call your husband, and then come back. And the woman says, I don't have a husband. And Jesus said, you're right, you don't have a husband, but you've had 5, and the man you're living with now isn't your husband. So she was telling him the truth, but she was veiling the truth with deception, hoping that he wouldn't know. And now all of a sudden, her worst fear is realized. This man knows me. He knows everything I've ever done. He has her undivided attention. She responds nervously and looks at him and says, I'm beginning to think you may be a prophet. No kidding. He knew everything there was to know about her and never met her before. I think that that's probably true, lady. He is a prophet. But with this one master stroke, Jesus opens the woman's inner soul, her very deepest self. But herein lies the difference. He doesn't do it to be harsh or cruel to this woman. He simply knows this truth, that if she cannot be honest with herself, if she cannot come to the place and admit that the lifestyle that she is living with, the relationships that she has had are sin, then she is never going to be able to take this drink of eternal living water. And that is Jesus' desire, that she be eternally with him. You see, the gift is free, brothers and sisters, but it can't be received unless you are honest with God about who you are and what you've done. That's what we call confession. If we want forgiveness, we need to be honest with God. Well, she wants to change the subject, and she wants to do it fast. She brings up an old controversy about where we're supposed to worship. Is it here on this mountain, or is it in Jerusalem? Let's not talk about me and my 5 husbands and the guy I'm shacking up with right now, Jesus. Let's talk about where we're supposed to worship. You're a prophet. You can tell me isn't that just like us? When Jesus starts to get a little too close and reveal something too private about my life, we like to point our fingers and say, well, I wouldn't be this way if they wouldn't have been that way. And I wouldn't be doing this right now if so-and-so wouldn't have done that to me first. And, oh, by the way, how's the weather? How about those Jayhawks? We talk about anything and everything but what Jesus wants to talk about, the heart of who we are. When he starts to get close, we like to avoid the conversation. But Jesus keeps it real. He is not easily deterred because of his love for her, because of his desire to see her healed, forgiven, and made brand new. He knows that this woman's pain has a history, and now that it's been revealed, she has to admit it, and Jesus cuts right to the heart of the issue, even with the question that she asked. He said, listen, it isn't about Jerusalem or this mountain. There is a day coming when we worship God. We've got to do it in spirit and in truth. So what does that mean? It literally means this. Nothing more, nothing less. We have to come before God with complete self-disclosure. Here I am, Lord, this is me. I know that you know, and now I want you to know that I know that you know. Everything there is to know about this man, about this woman, about who I am, about what I think about what I do and what I don't do. He knows it all. You see, it's about being real. It's about being honest with God about myself, about who I really, truly am. And what changes this woman, and eventually changes the entire hometown which she lives. When you read the story, you'll see that that happens, is because Jesus peered into the ugly truth of her sinful life, and he didn't push her away. He didn't rule her out. He didn't say, you're beyond help. Do you hear what I hear in those words? Come see a man who knows everything there is to know about me, and he still loves me. Even though I despised him, even though I turned my back on him, even though I mocked him at one time with some of my friends and made fun of people who love Jesus, oh, those Christians, he still loves me. Even though that big video screen is being played, he loves me anyway. Could it be? Is it that this is the Christ? That this is the true picture of who God really is? I believe so. I believe it with all of my heart. You see, the woman had a lot of defensiveness because she had a lot of sin in her life. She had a lot of reasons to be hiding from society and from God. She believed that the judgment was coming her way, and she was waiting and hoping that someday, somehow, God might come into her life with good news. Good news that the arms of God may still be open to love her, heal her, forgive her, and give her a brand new life opportunity. And then one day, it happened. She met that man. It was the God-man. It was Jesus Christ, the Savior of the world, who said to her, I who speak to you am He. Praise God. You see, that's the whole reason Jesus came. The whole purpose for His coming is to show us that we can come out of hiding, that we can be forgiven, that the Father invites us to come into the full light of His truth, to be forgiven, to be restored. You see, the truth is that if we genuinely, authentically open ourselves up to Jesus and we are honest to God, that is when we begin to drink from His living water. And that drink of living water is when our lives begin to change. Brothers and sisters, you don't drink the water and live the old life. You drink the water and you're transformed to a brand new life. A life that desires not to sin, but to sin not. A new life that desires to live according to the will of God in your life and to love God and obey His commands with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. That's what the living water does for us. It gives us this real opportunity to be transformed and not be bound by those old ways of living ever again. That, my friends, is when we become authentic. It's when we become real. It's when we can stand before God and say, I got nothing to hide. Show my video. Because Jesus has covered my sin. And I now walk with Him in a brand new life. Be honest to God today. And know that no matter what you've done or what you think, if you're honest with Him and you come before Him today, He will not reject you. His arms are wide open. And He will love you into the kingdom and pour that living water over you and cleanse you and purify you and give you a drink to sustain you to walk in the light as He is in the light. Many of us, in many ways, are just like the woman at the well. But in this one way, I know for sure we all are exactly like her. We all need the drink of living water. So today, as we close, we will sing, "Fill my cup, Lord. It is truly the only drink that will satisfy your soul."